folks. This is Michelle Allman, CEO and company cheerleader with Clear Digital Media. We are back again today with our Trendz Podcast. And today, my guest is Steve. And will you pronounce your last name for me, Steve? Because I messed
It's Taddei.
Taddei. Oh, I love
Taddei.
it. Taddei. Okay.
Taddei, yeah.
I have been wanting to say Taddo for some reason. I don't know why. So Taddei. All right, cool.
I've heard it before, so that'd be fun.
Awesome. We're here with Steve Taddei, who is an audiologist. Little background on Steve. Dr. Steve is an audiologist and audio engineer from Chicago, my former hometown. Steve holds a degree in audio arts and acoustics with a focus on audio design and production from Columbia College, which is very cool. We're going to talk a little bit about that. You're currently an audiologist in a nonprofit developing educational content alongside your clinic schedule, which sounds like you are a very busy man. And a co-founder of a startup which has developed an assistive listening device, which is very exciting, and we can talk about that as well. And the designs have received patent approval, which is very cool. You're also an adjunct professor at several universities, instructing courses in acoustics, instrumentation, and audio production, if I pronounce that all right. And you are a member of the Audio Engineering Society, which we have also been a member of, which is very cool.
Oh,
Has
great.
worked as a freelance audio engineer for about the past 10 years. So that is that's not even complete, but that is a deep group of experiences that you have, which is very cool. And it kind of leads into one, a big congrats, because I know you've launched your own podcast.
Thank
Hearing
you.
Now, is that correct? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Awesome. Congratulations. So tell me a little bit about that. Let's start with that. What inspired you to start your own podcast?
Sure. Well, and thank you for having me on. I noticed you have your podcast as well. In this kind of change to at-home work and the stay-home order, I was looking at some ways to kind of get some more creative juices flowing, and podcasting is something that's obviously growing in popularity. And interesting enough, it's never anything that I've really found interesting or I've gone into.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was a really cool way for me to explore a new element of audio, try something different. And but I noticed in clinic, we end up repeating the same things over and over and over again, whether it be about earwax, how to use hearing aids, counseling, different counseling methods. And figure a podcast would be a great way to hopefully reach a much larger audience all at the same time. So in a way, a little bit more efficient way of doing that, and hopefully educating people, giving them some agency over their hearing health, and just seemed like a good combination of all of that, and to stay kind of a member of the audio community and hearing community while this was going on.
Cool. So when you launch your podcast, are you launching it with the consumer in mind? You're really building content around educating the consumer, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And they can go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. No, it's fine.
So they can find your podcast on all the platforms. Is that, or do you have it on a specific platform?
So I have it published through Anchor, and then through Anchor, it should be through all the main streaming services like Apple, Google, Spotify. It should be on all of those at this point.
Okay, great. Well, we'll definitely link the podcast in the description so people can find it. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm always intrigued, like what inspires people to get started doing things like this, because, we hear, oh, you got a podcast, or you got to do video, you have to do this, you that. And oftentimes I think that we might get into something because we think we're supposed to, but I love to hear when there's a true inspiration behind it. Like, you're in clinic, you're seeing patients, you know what they ask, you know what they need to know, right? And launching something like that that's really easy for people to gather information and educate themselves, I think in the long run makes such a big difference for so many people, because an educated patient is a better patient, right?
Absolutely. And that's the goal. That's the goal with all this. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So I'm really curious, because your background's a little bit different than some audiologists, and that is your background's a lot in audio engineering and music, which is very exciting to me. I'm very curious about, because my whole mom's side of the family are musicians. My mom's mom was a composer. My grandpa was a professional singer.
Really?
Yeah. My grandpa's dad was a professional singer. My mom's dad was a professional singer. Unfortunately for me, I got ripped off because I can't sing worth squat. In fact, I'm so bad that the radio asked me to stop singing because it's terrible. And that intrigues me too, in families where some have musical talent and some don't. My brother's a very good singer. He went to Cleveland School of Music, which was,
Mhm.
or is it? Yeah, Cleveland. So he was in Ohio. So he really inherited some of that great talent. Now I played an instrument and I can read music. I mean, I understand it, but so I'm really curious too about how did it start with music? Did it start with audiology? Tell me more about the blend between the two and what you've seen in all that.
Sure. Yeah, it's been kind of a very circuitous route to end up where I'm at right now. I started off in college actually in game design and
Mm-hmm.
programming,
Oh, that's cool.
and I enjoyed doing that in the creative side of it. But I was already I was performing musician at the time, playing in a couple different bands, and I found myself leaving school to go home and work in the small little recording studio and work on audio stuff. So I switched
Yeah.
over early college over into audio engineering. Absolutely loved it to this day. Still love it. Can't get enough of the technology, the passion that people in the field have.
Yeah.
It's just infectious. And then from there, I ended up you can't help but notice that many audio engineers, musicians, they're exposed to so much noise.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
it's a shame because noise-induced hearing loss, music-induced hearing loss is one of the number one causes of permanent hearing loss, and yet
Mhm.
it's preventable. Um, and it kind of just struck a chord when I was in college, and that led into audiology and hearing conservation and the musical side of audiology.
Did you experience hearing loss yourself?
I do have a little bit of hearing loss from being in being in all those bands, and it's very stereotypical performing in a basement of a house with
Mm-hmm.
concrete walls everywhere, wanting to put in hearing protection, but you can't because the other band members make fun of you, so you got
Yeah.
to take them out, and all the stereotypes of the machismo of being in bands and not being able to sing as well and hear everyone else around me because of the occlusion. So yeah, I feel like I've hit many of the same struggles and roadblocks that people I try and help now have hit with hearing protection.
So
Absolutely.
that's interesting too, because in like you said, I think it's what 34% of hearing loss is noise induced, and then with more and more exposure with kids having earbuds and different headsets on nonstop all day long, it just
Hmm.
wears at the mechanics, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
with musicians and the whole stigma, because I think that we've evolved a bit. I think that we've become a society that's really like, okay, get over it. We're more inclusive,
Yeah.
rather. People aren't as freaked out about the idea that something's off or that they need to address something. But with musicians, do you think that that still is a stigma, that it's uncool to wear hearing protection?
Um, so yes, Michelle, I do still see a lot of that stigma there. It seems to be decreasing though, fortunately, and not
Mm.
just in the older population who has likely already sustained the damage, but there are still quite a few friends and just people I've known from the past in engineering, and whether it's a recommendation I've given them or someone else has, they seem to be trying hearing protection.
Yeah.
So the barrier no longer seems to be the stigma; it seems to be, is the hearing protection interfering with their performance and their ability to play and work in a group. So that is honestly my experience where I see more people struggling now and then giving up once they've tried hearing protection because maybe it's not the right type for them. They're not using it properly.
Right.
But yeah, fortunately, at least the stigma of it has certainly seemed to decrease.
So, in your experience, has there been a product that's worked really well? Because I do notice it. I've been in concerts. In fact, before all the COVID stuff, I was lucky because I am a massive Post Malone fan. And so he
Hmm.
came to concert here in Austin. And I'm 52 years old. I'm not ashamed to say I dig Post Malone. It's good. You know, I was there with a bunch of young people. It's all good. I'm like, it's all right. I'm the mom in the aisle dancing. I'm that chick. Everyone's making fun of it. It's cool. But I did notice, and I notice this a lot with musicians or concerts where they tend to take it out. If they're wearing on
Hmm.
stage some kind of hearing protection, they take it out. And I'm assuming that that's because it blocks your ears and it interferes with how you are experiencing music yourself as an artist. Is that the case?
So there are a couple different elements there in play. Yes, a part of it is not being able to hear the crowd quite as well and get
Mm-hmm.
that feedback.
Yeah, right, right.
unfortunately, I think there's a little bit of a feedback loop between professional artists maybe doing that because of what you just said, and then aspiring musicians doing it because that's what they see their idols doing, where they'll
Ah,
take one out and maybe they
right,
don't understand why.
right.
Um, and again, yeah, it would come down to awareness, knowing that you're actually putting yourself at a higher risk when you take out one earbud or one
Mhm.
custom fit hearing protection device, giving you protection on one side, exposure on the other. Or even if you're using in-ear monitors, it can exacerbate that far worse because now you have
Right.
an amplified device in your ear. And say if you're wearing an in-ear monitor in your left ear, you take out your right so you can hear the crowd a little bit better. And say the crowd is
Mhm.
100 plus decibels, chances are you're going to then tell your headphone engineer to increase your in-ear monitor to match what you're hearing in the environment
Oh,
so that you
yeah.
can still hear the band. So really quickly it gets yeah, in-ear monitors are not inherently hearing protection. They have to be used properly with appropriate training in order for them to be used in a hearing conservation way.
Is there something missing in the market? Could there be a better product, or is it just a matter of understanding it?
There are definitely products that mitigate that issue. A couple
Mhm.
companies have designed in-ear monitors that have microphones on them as well. So you
Okay.
can still get that feedback of the crowd and you can hear them. Or if you go over by your drummer, for example, you'll start getting that spatial relation of now I've walked away from the guitarist on my left side, walked closer to the drum. So it helps bring back some of that realism and you're
Right.
not isolated from the crowd listening to a very clinical mixed performance in your head. So there are definitely those devices. The barriers just come down to, I think, again, the stigmas, the cost of them, the
Yeah.
extra energy to do
Yeah.
that.
That's really interesting. Now, is that experience? So you started in music. You started as a musician. What did you play an instrument? Which instrument did you play?
So I played guitar and I said that I sang, but I'm not a good singer. So it was more so we lost our vocalist and someone had to do it. I was writing the songs at the time, so I figured I might as well sing my own words. And so it was fun.
That's
It was
hilarious.
it
I
was fun.
said I was a
Yeah.
singer. So what kind of music? What genre?
Oh, we were very clearly just making a combination of Metallica and System of a Down, and then
Okay.
and
All
meshing it
right.
together, and then we kind of went more towards a kill switch engage. So very aggressive, very loud, nonstop loud music.
I also dig
Absolutely.
that kind of music. I mean, here's the thing about music. It moves you, right? It generates an
Oh yeah.
emotion. And I think that that's like the whole tie-in to audiology and hearing care. I mean, we listen to music loud, we listen to it with headphones because we're trying to experience an emotion. And so whatever the genre may be, it moves you unlike other things. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because the irony of the fact that that emotion drives us, motivates us, yet the more volume we turn on, the longer we listen to it at a higher volume, the more damage we're doing, which then creates a problem down the road when we want to experience the same thing. We got to turn the volume up even more,
To
you know?
compensate, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think the whole tie-in with hearing loss and the fact that it's about being moved. It's about that connection, right? It's about the emotion
Hmm.
we feel when we hear things. And I also think it's really ironic that the whole hesitation to move forward with getting our hearing treated and being tested ties into the whole emotion around not being able to hear. And
Hmm.
how ironic, right? Because the solution, I think sometimes for people, and this is kind of the long way to lead into my next question is, what is the biggest fear you sense from patients when they're holding back, right? They're not, like, we know it takes 7 to 10 years. And why? Like, what are you seeing when you're talking to patients? What has been the roadblock for them?
With regard to hearing aids or hearing protection and being
I would
more
say hearing
conscientious.
aids. Yeah, once you've gotten to the point where I have to take action, but it takes us a while to get there. What is it that
It,
stops people, in your opinion?
Fortunately, nowadays, the cost is not as much of a barrier.
Hmm.
And with hearing aids, it still comes down to, I think, the stigmas of if I have a hearing aid, that means that I'm X years old,
Yeah.
which anyone in the field knows that's not the case. But um, the most stereotypical kind of clinical situation is you have a husband and a wife who come in And the husband is only there because his wife has made him come in and said,
Right.
nope, you have to come in. I'm tired of repeating myself, turning up the TV for you. And then he's in denial. He will finally accept that he needs to try hearing aids. And um, interesting when you have a combination of both a husband and wife coming in together. Wife seems so much more willing to try hearing aids and accept that, like, I just want to have a better quality of life, so I'm going to try anything that might give me a better quality of life. And then it's happened several times over the past year when one way or the other, it's like, once she's tried it, I'll try it.
Yeah.
If she'll be
Yep.
kind of the test pilot, and then I'll see if it'll work for me. So yeah, the stigmas definitely still seem to be the biggest barrier, kind of that ego associated, that hearing loss is a direct indicator that you're older, which is not
Yep.
by any means the case.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's very much human nature. It's interesting that women are more apt to try because I think, and that no diss to men, but women have a tendency to work through things in a different way, right? Like men are problem solvers. What's the problem? I want the solution. Yet in this circumstance where it involves like something related to ego, there tends to be a hesitation. Where in this case, right? Women tend to be like, get over it. Let's, all right, I'll do it. So it's very interesting. And I think it's also, like I was saying earlier, like women tend to worry about aging a little bit more, but from an aesthetic. And it's a little bit different. With men, hey, your hair can go gray, dudes still look good. They can have wrinkles on their face and they still look pretty good. Women are more sensitive to that, but less sensitive to the fact that something's on their ear, so it's really interesting. So
yeah, just willing to be happier, right? Where men, they'll be sticking the muds. They'll say, nope, I'm going to work through this. And there's no working. It's your wife that will suffer, your family that will suffer.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then the truth with that is, the whole situational hearing loss, or I can't hear my wife when she's nagging me, when the truth may be that it's really high frequency loss, right? Like that's why.
Right.
They're not hearing their wives speak. Or you can be like
hear
my
that
dad,
very often.
and be like, "Oh, my batteries are dead. Sorry, can't hear you."
No.
Yeah.
It's always bad in a fitting when someone asks, so there's a mute button, I can use that for my wife, right?
Like, this is all good, I can hear now, but I can also hear her, so we got to fix that. That's
right.
funny.
Yeah, that's the issue in the follow-ups. I need a mute button. No.
That's funny. So has your experience as a musician changed how you've treated patients, or how you are able to relate to what they might be experiencing?
I would like to think so. A background in audio engineering and music definitely lends itself to certain avenues in audiology and understanding the technology a lot more, what it is to perform like real ear measures, even down to as simple as communicating with someone who doesn't know how to communicate sound. And that's most people, because we have very few words that actually will describe sound. We'll say loud, soft, but soft is more of a tactile. We can say resonance, that's too bright, tinny. Like, all these words are pulling from other senses, and that's something you deal with all the time in music. As an audio engineer, you're working with the client. They're trying to describe what changes or what they want out of a specific element in a mix, and then you have to make that kind of interpretation from the subjective to the objective. And it certainly makes it much easier for me, I think, to then work with patients, figure out what the issue is, and is that something that can be fixed within the boundaries of a hearing aid and the digital signal processing. So I'd like to think that it helps.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you think music therapy would be effective for people in terms of, so as a musician, your ears are trained differently. You're hearing, especially as an audio engineer, right? So you're trained to listen for nuances that others may not be trained to listen to or listen for. So the auditory therapy, I guess it kind of leads into, as a audiologist, do you think it makes sense to have some follow-up auditory therapy in alignment with the fitting of a hearing aid? And if so, have you executed that, or have you seen that make a difference?
So to answer your first question, yes, I think it makes a big difference, and it should be a part of many audiological fittings. And there's so much research coming out about musical training, musical therapy, and the effects that that has.
Mhm.
And when you read the studies, you can't help but think, well, anyone could benefit from this, even if you don't have a hearing loss, because of the benefits that it shows with cognition and social well-being. It can have effects on tinnitus and things like that. Um, so yeah, it definitely is something that a lot of people can benefit from. And normally, what I do, like the first time I fit someone with a hearing aid, is I ask them to go home, think of their favorite chair, listen to their favorite song, and maybe have their favorite drink.
Mm.
As we were discussing earlier, um, there can be lots of stigma around hearing aids. So when people get them for the first time, it's a rather shocking experience, or it can be. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a bad shock, but it is just a shock. And there's a lot of retraining that the brain has to go through. So you potentially haven't heard these sounds for 5, 10, 20 years. So by going home and asking them to, go home and listen to their favorite song, have a good drink in their favorite chair, it's just trying to reinforce all positive senses.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
a big element of musical training is that kind of feel good sense that we get from our music. And that's why it can help with some people with tinnitus, because it's kind of reorganizing the way that we are approaching tinnitus and hearing aids. And it can definitely remove some of those barriers. Having your first experience with hearing aids, which can be really shocking, to be
Mhm.
something that's positive.
Yeah.
And then you've already put one foot in the right direction towards an improved quality of life. And there are plenty of people who will try and go home and like say, oh, after this fitting, I'm going to go run to the store and do some shopping. And I recommend take your hearing aids out when you do that, because I want that first experience to be something positive and something musical, um, for so many reasons. There's so many benefits to it. And it's something that can definitely, I think, be worked into audiology a lot more with
Mhm.
follow-up. See, there's really, there are lots of studies, and the success varies, of course, from methodology to methodology, but all of them pretty much suggest that it has benefits for your social well-being, cognition, pitch perception, amplitude, kind of awareness, and that relates to so much more with speech and noise understanding and other types of auditory processing, like scene analysis, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, do you do auditory therapy right now as a follow-up with patients?
So other than like what I mentioned, and if they are musicians, having them sometimes if they're running into issues like bring in their music, um, I do not have a strict like clinical
Mhm.
formalized training for them. Um, they do vary considerably in their execution. It can be as minimal as just listening to music a certain number of hours per week. If you're a musician, just singing, performing. A lot of studies have looked at people just taking like an online course for pitch training for
Mm.
vocals.
Mm. That's
Can be just
interesting.
even like music awareness classes where
Yeah.
you're listening to a song in a group and then talking about what emotional response you've had to that. All of these seemingly very small changes in life have been shown to have statistically significant improvements in various elements of people's like attention and just auditory processing. So no, to answer your question, I do not have like a specific musical therapist that I refer people to. I always recommend that they include music as much as possible in their lives as they're willing to do. Certainly.
That is an awesome recommendation, though, to go home after getting your first fitting and to listen in a comfortable chair to your favorite song with your favorite drink. Like that,
Right.
definitely, you're surrounding yourself with like all the good vibes, all the good things. And
Absolutely right. All the best vibes. Yep.
yeah, that is really good advice because I think, just based on some of the experiences that we have and having been in the industry for a long time, my dad actually has a nonprofit clinic in Chicago, and so I've grown up in the space, and then growing up around musicians, but knowing that some of the biggest roadblocks for people in their experience and the quality of life post fitting is that first out and about with their hearing aids
Hmm.
on. They didn't choose maybe the best, environment to be wearing brand new hearing aids. There wasn't a whole lot of counseling around, let's set you up for success.
Hmm.
So I think that's really good advice. That's awesome, to just do that. So as a musical audiologist, is there fundamentally something different that you're doing? Or does that come really in the background of what you have around music and audiology?
Fundamentally, no, it's not a difference. Um, it's how you approach it, and then your underlying understanding.
Mhm.
Just as you can have audiologists who specialize in, for example, like cochlear implants, dispensing audiologist, research audiologist, and that lends themselves very well to that specific um, kind of practice within audiology. Having a background in music, understanding the differences, and like how to program a hearing aid for better music perception and music quality, it really, that is where the difference really comes in. Being able to communicate with an engineer if they come in, and being able to understand what they're saying, if they're talking about specific frequencies, the high E string on their guitar being around 350 hertz, and then if they're soloing, knowing what frequency range that's going to be in. It really gives your brain a lot of information with targets. And if you're meeting targets up there, just knowing that of course they're not going to be able to perceive their own solos very well, or different things that you can do in that case to help them out. Just different changes in instruments, even if it's if you're playing, like, let's say, an alto saxophone and you have a high frequency hearing loss, shifting to a tenor uh, where you're lowering the fundamental resonance, hopefully then shifting the frequency response of the instrument lower into a frequency response that you can hear, can make a fantastic difference for these people. So
That's
fundamentally, no, I don't think there's a difference, but it's the approach and the understanding in the approach.
Do you specialize in that? Are there musicians in Chicago that know I need to go see Steve because he understands?
I'd like to say yes to that. I know there are some musicians here in Rockford where I practice
Yeah.
that definitely seem to like coming to me, and they said when the first time they met me, they looked me up online and they came to see me. But there are plenty of absolutely fantastic musical audiologists or music audiologists and just standard audiologists. Um, so you can get fantastic care regardless, as long as the person understands sound. Like I said, I find it makes it a little bit more fun for them, and it's certainly
Yeah.
more fun for me just because we can geek out over the gear a little bit
Yeah,
more,
right.
which is enjoyable, and we can kind of get lost in the terminology and have lots of fun talking about that. Or I have a patient who brought in a bunch of magazines, and he was telling me about these like $10,000 turntables, and the rhetoric is much more fun in
Yeah.
that
Well,
sense.
there's something about music. It changes the conversation, right? So, it goes from when we talk about the stigmas, we talk about all the things that make people feel uncomfortable about getting a hearing aid. You bring
Hmm.
music into the story and it does change things. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, like a hearing aid is really the ultimate streaming headset, with the technology today and everything's connected. And to frame it up for a patient where it's like, this is about your like feeling all that, and given that you're not going to experience everything that you did when you were younger, and whether it be age related, noise related, or some other condition that created the hearing loss, just the idea that they can emotionally reconnect with the things that they love the most. And so many people, music is probably the number one thing that they miss when they lose their hearing.
Hmm.
That's pretty cool. I think
It
that
is.
it just
Yeah.
changes the whole conversation, which is neat.
Yeah, it connects. It can say things that we can't say with words, and on a very deep level, it absolutely
Hmm.
can connect us. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
like
I mean,
you had mentioned, yeah, it
hmm
doesn't have to be the same style. Like you
hmm
can appreciate music even if it's not, your favorite genre, just because it has that appreciation to it, that emotional connection.
it's a language of the soul, and so
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I think it brings people who maybe can't communicate with language together because they can communicate with music, which,
Hmm.
I think is pretty cool. Which I think,
Definitely. Yeah.
again, it goes back to like what freaks us out about hearing loss. It's kind of like when you lose your hearing, you've walked into a room of a bunch of people that speak a foreign language and you're left out. That's really
Hmm.
what it feels like, And so I think anything that can turn the conversation to a positive that gets people really emotionally invested in taking action is awesome. Talk about COVID a little bit. What has changed for you, and where do you see things going? And really this is about, we all know what's changed is that, we've been in quarantine for all practical purposes and we haven't been able to
Hmm.
get out and about, and it changes when you're seeing patients and they can't come to the office, obviously that changes things. But what have you done to manage patients? And then how do you think this might change how people actually act? And what I mean by that is, do you think it'll change the model of care in any way? And if so, what do you think will change?
hmm So I think it is a perfect time for audiologists to see how the model can change, because it kind of forces us to. Any field is going to resist, um, can resist the status quo. And now we're forced into this world where telehealth, teleaudiology absolutely can be used. Um, a lot of the technology that's out there, I don't think it is as seamless as it could be for working with these patients. And still, and like where we are in a very rural area, there are plenty of smaller towns where there isn't really good internet connection. So the few times that some of the audiologists at our facility have tried to interface in that way, they haven't had very good luck. But it certainly sets the stage. It almost like forces us to kind of swallow that pill and start using telehealth, because that's the only way change will happen, for us to actually try it, see what changes need to be made, what issues will come up, not just in a hypothetical sense. So it's fantastic. In our clinic, I know what we've had to do is lots of curbside assistance right now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because of the issues we run into with internet connection, and not many of our patients have gone to these different devices that, or purchase the extra streaming devices that allow you to do remote care. The few that have really benefited from it. Um, it's an interesting experience, both from the provider side, getting over that kind of first step of doing it, and then from their standpoint of understanding the benefit of having that remote technology and that remote programming. Because it's of course going to vary for everyone, whether it's something that is needed for them or not. The person who is retired living at a assistive facility out in the middle of nowhere that has to travel 45 minutes to see our clinic, absolutely they could benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
The person that lives down the street, they probably don't care all that much in our instance. Right. So there are lots of variables in it. Once it's something I think that is built into the devices more seamlessly, it will make a big difference. Absolutely.
Do you think that there's room for improvement right now with what teleaudiology offers? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers with it is this concern of, I don't want to say profitability, but you can't really bill for like counseling.
Mm-hmm.
To my understanding right now, doing any type of counseling like this, you're not able to bill the same way. So I think there's lots of resistance in the clinic, and that if everything is more standard for blocked schedules in person, it's hard to integrate that into the system. And I know with like one of the manufacturers who offers like asynchronous remote fine tuning,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I tried out a year or so ago, pretty heavily. We tried to get lots of patients in and set that up, and it didn't work as easily as we thought it would have, with them kind of pinging us, hey, can you make this change, and us finding time in clinic to do that. But we weren't going to set aside time for those pings, because there weren't enough patients. So
Right.
it's almost like there needs to be more of a fundamental change in the way clinic goes. And I think we're on this teeter-totter right now where all the weight is still on in clinic
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully, as some of the early adopters set the stage, and clinic early adopters as well, it will certainly make things easier. And COVID-19 has certainly accelerated that. It's been a catalyst, I think, for many clinics to take that leap.
Well, I think sometimes things that really suck kind of force us to think a little bit differently. And so it's like that little kick that okay, it may not be perfect, but it's forcing the thought process, which only leads to improvement, because then it reveals opportunity for someone to come up with a better, faster, different, more effective way.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sometimes necessary to lead to change that improves an industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So big picture in the industry, do you think that the COVID is either going to stir it up to the extent where Unfortunately, it doesn't work out well for everybody, right? Like sometimes if we're really stuck, we're really fearful, and we don't adopt different ways of looking at things, we unfortunately don't make it. Do you see that as being something that is going to impact the industry? Do you see, there's probably going to be a change in how it all looks in the big picture?
Honestly, I don't think we will see a huge global change from this in the field. I think we will just move right back to what we were doing beforehand. But hopefully, then at least that effort during this stay-at-home order and the quarantine will have gotten us that much further ahead in the development of it. Everyone's seeing the applicability of it and how it can be integrated into their clinics.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that is one of the main questions people have been asking over the years. This is great having this remote fine tuning. How do I work that into my existing clinic schedule?
Mm-hmm.
And now there will be many more clinics that can actually say, here is a roadmap to how we did that. These were the pros, the cons, and how we were able to adapt it. So I don't think right away there will be this huge global change. I think it definitely set us ahead, though, in a big step forward,
Yeah,
which
for
is a good
sure.
positive from it.
Yeah. So has this changed the way that you guys reach your patients at all? Has it changed? Obviously, it changes the whole um, dynamic for care because nobody could come in for a period of time. And I know you're in Illinois, that may last a
Hmm.
little bit longer than some other states, unfortunately. What has that changed at all? How you're looking at outreach and how you're looking at marketing to a patient, or how you're looking at even just lead generation of any kind?
So that is not something like lead generation, the marketing side of it. That is not something I handle at the clinic. What I will say is it has affected, I think, how we'll approach follow-up care.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is something you do with your company. And then once the patient leaves the office, they forget so much of the information that you told them.
Right.
And then having something that the patient can take home to study in a sense or help them retain more of that information can be is absolutely necessary so that they don't leave the office, forget 75% of what you said, then they're coming back the next day to figure out how to use wax traps, how to change filters.
Right.
And I know at our clinic, we have been trying to promote a lot more some of the online videos and services that we've had for a while. And similar to what we were saying before, now it's kind of like, all right, it's been sitting in the hopper, but now we're actually going to use it and actually really start seeing how patients respond to it.
Yeah.
It seems to be helpful. And we've only recently, as of the past few weeks, really opened our doors and started doing some fits and some like emergency visits again. So it'll be much more telling in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. When do you anticipate being able to have patients in your clinic again?
We've started doing that as of the past 2 weeks. Like if someone comes in due to um, ear pain or occluding earwax, we'll do what we can to get them in. In those cases, they're everyone that I've seen, they have not been able to get into an ENT
Mm,
or primary care physician for
right.
assistance. So we'll try and offer them and try and remove the wax ourselves and follow as many safety standards as possible. We're all washing our hands. We're all wearing masks. Just maintaining social distance as much as possible with trying to do something like Truman management, which
Right.
obviously
A
you
little
write
bit
up on the
difficult.
person,
Right.
but it's it's very difficult. But yeah, it's very interesting from a clinical standpoint. And I know, like even the VA, we work with lots of VA cases. They've suspended them for the time being.
Yeah.
Um, like the hearing aid fits we're trying to limit them as much as possible to people who are previous users. So it's a much easier, less hands-on clinic or appointment to keep things safer for everyone.
Yeah. It's such an interesting time, because I think we've now, because it's been 30 days, a little over 30 days, and after 30 days, habits form. Right. And so now it feels across all space, whether it's in clinics or, it's just how we're behaving as human beings. And it's interesting because it feels it's going to take some time for us to not feel awkward around each other. Doesn't, I mean, it's
Hmm.
even just that as human beings, being in a place, even going to the grocery store where you're sort of like, it's awkward. It's kind of like being around a bunch of people, your friends that you just had a little fight with, and you're not really sure how to
Mm-hmm.
re-engage with each other. It's this weird sort of dance in
Yeah.
a grocery store. Like, I don't know, is that 6 feet? I don't know. I mean, am I supposed to smile at you, or am I supposed to look angry? Like, what am I supposed to do? Everyone
Right.
kind of, it's just awkward. And then, everyone wants to do the right thing. Everyone wants to make sure everyone's safe. And it's just, at what level everyone feels is comfortable for that. It's just awkward. So I think it's going to be very interesting as we all
Yeah.
start to get back to it. And then, all right, how's this supposed to look? So, but I think I have confidence that people will fall back into what makes us powerful as human beings, and that is we look to help each other, right? So I think it's like been a setback, but it will come back even stronger. That's my
Yeah.
belief.
And it's a great perspective. I agree with you. I think the positive side of it, once the stay-at-home order's been lifted, I think we'll have the opposite of that, where we're still really awkward now that we are around people and there aren't those barriers. And like you said, we'll have to relearn what it's like to socialize, not over like
Yeah.
FaceTime and phone calls. But,
Yeah, to
it
actually
is
see people.
extremely interesting,
Yeah.
right? To see them, right?
And then it's also like the gratitude of being like, yep, I really needed it. And I think in conversations I've had with other hearing care professionals, it's that, wow, my patients now really realize how important this relationship is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
become glaringly obvious that we need to be connecting with each other. And so I think that's a real positive.
That's very true. It really does highlight how much of a difference it can make for them. Like,
Yep.
there was a patient in our clinic last week, and she came in for something that was extremely simple. It took us 5 minutes, and we saw her sitting out in the parking lot, and one of us went out there to just make sure everything was okay. And it turned out that she was crying because she could hear again now, and it was something so simple.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of like, this took me 5 minutes, but to her it was worth far more than that 5 minutes. And it really does put it in perspective, makes you um, feel grateful, humbled that you can be the person to help them out in that way, being a part of the system. And the mutual relationship from both standpoint, the provider and the patient, on both ends of that equation. That's
Yeah,
great.
that's a really cool story, because that makes a pretty powerful point, that a 5-minute adjustment meant enough for her that she sat and cried
Yeah.
because she was able to hear. It was that simple. We see that a little
Mm-hmm.
bit with one of our other business in assistive listening, so the amplified phones and things like that. We're finding that through this, we've been getting a lot more phone calls, but they were phone calls just because someone wanted to talk. It was really interesting.
Interesting.
And that the fact that there was a human being that answered the phone, and that they could communicate, and that they could ask questions, was all that mattered to them. It was just that, it was just the engagement that mattered. So it is,
Yeah.
it oftentimes reveals what's most important to us. And in this industry, I think that we're remarkably blessed to be able to have that kind of impact on someone's life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In the end, we're all human, right? We just want to be happy.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
We want to be
Mm-hmm.
happy. That's for sure. Well, I totally appreciate your time, and this has been awesome, because it educated me a lot about just music and what you're doing with music in combination with audiology. That's pretty cool. I think that's a
Oh, thank
secret
you.
sauce
Yeah.
there. That's pretty awesome. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that you were a musician. That's pretty cool.
Well, I prefer to stick to the audio engineering. Like I said, I wasn't much of a singer, so I try and hide the online videos of me performing live.
If
But
only,
it
like,
was
if there is one thing I wish I could have a talent, it would be singing, because it's such an emotional release, you know?
yeah. Yeah, you can
Unfortunately,
play other instruments and yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, even my shower head is like, please stop. Dear Lord, you're killing us here. That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Steve. And what we're going to do, well, for everyone watching, we're going to have Steve's links in the bio and information on Steve and some of the things you're doing, and really appreciate your time. Definitely going to have you come back and talk about your very cool product as we get closer to that. And wish you tons of good luck as we start to get back to normal.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Nice talking to you again, and stay safe and take care.
Same here, Steve. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.